Hello, John Shaffery here today with Brian Koegle from the law firm of Poole, Shaffery, and Koegle. And we're discussing California employment law. Brian, one of the biggest areas that folks talk about and questions they have when it comes to California employment law is wage and hour law. What are the three most common mistakes employers are making in this area?
Well, I could probably start with about 30 most common mistakes, but since we're just going to talk about three today, the first and foremost is calculating regular rate of pay. The second is timekeeping and record keeping on their attendance records. And then the third are those pesky meal and rest periods that we like to talk about all so often.
And why is the regular rate of pay such a big ticket item?
Well, in California, the big issue here is that most employers don't take into consideration any sort of incentive pay, commissions, non-discretionary bonuses. These are types of elements that must work into a regular rate of pay calculation. And let me explain. If you have an employee who typically earns $20 per hour as a non-exempt employee, but they receive regular bonus payments based upon performance of the business, based upon quotas being achieved, if they receive any sort of commission or spiff or stipend pay, any of those actually go to the base hourly rate. So in other words, if an employee had a $20 an hour regular rate of pay typically, but they received a $500 bonus, you would have to take that $500 bonus, divide it by the number of hours that they worked during that time period to create the new regular rate of pay. And the reason it's so important is because California's overtime laws are all hinged upon regular rate of pay. And so in many circumstances, an employee may work a full work week at their $20 an hour regular rate of pay, and their overtime rate would therefore be $30 an hour. 1.5 times $20 is $30 per hour. But then months later, if they receive that bonus, that commission, that spiff, the obligation is upon the employer to go back and recalculate the sum on their regular rate of pay. So where the employee may have earned $30 per hour previously for that overtime, the new regular rate of pay, taking into consideration that incentive pay, may be $33, $36, $39 per hour. And you do have to make that sum up to the employee in a reasonable amount of time. Many employers have found themselves on the wrong side of a class action or a PAGA, Private Attorney General Act claim as a result of miscalculating the regular rate of pay. This is specifically designed and targeting the service-based industry firms right now. Barber shops, manicure shops, anybody who sells product as an additional part of their wage, make sure you're going back and reclassifying and confirming what the regular rate of pay is for those employees.
Now, Brian, we see many employers use rounding policies when they're recording an employee's time and attendance. What issues, if any, are you seeing with this type of procedure?
Well, and so that the audience understands, rounding is this theory of making sure that the time reflected on a timesheet is based upon the closest nearest hour. For instance, if you had an employee who is scheduled to clock in at 8 a.m. and she clocks in at 7:55, typically an employer will round that time to 8 a.m. On the flip side of that, if the employee clocked in at 8:05 a.m., that her time would round back to 8 a.m. as well. The problem with rounding has been the Supreme Court of California has repeatedly watered this down. There was a case 2 years ago known as Trester versus Starbucks that basically alluded to, suggested, or implied that rounding policies are going to be under great scrutiny. And if there is any loss to the employee, that policy will be deemed to be out of compliance with California law. What does that mean? That means that every minute of your employee's tracked time would be compensable, meaning that you have an obligation to pay that sum. Most recently, the Supreme Court in California has ruled in the Donahoe versus AMN case that there is no circumstance that an employer may round based upon an employee's punches related to their meal periods. That means that if an employee punches out at 12:33, it does not round back to 12:30. It must stay at 12:33. This is a very critical issue. For those of you with time and attendance policies, make sure you go back to ensure that the punches in and out from the lunch period are not rounding because that is now out of compliance according to California law.
Finally, Brian, let's just go over the very basics for this segment for both meal and rest period breaks.
Right. And meal and rest periods right now have still continued to be one of the hottest topics and the biggest areas of multi-plaintiff litigation in California. Meal periods are the essential part of this. 30 minutes must be provided to every employee who works in a shift of 5 hours or more. They must begin that lunch period before they've completed 5 hours of work. If it starts late, or if they don't receive 30 minutes uninterrupted off the clock, they are entitled to 1 hour of penalty pay. For rest periods, if you have an employee who works as short a shift as 3.5 hours, they're entitled to 10 minutes on the clock, free of any duties. If they're working a standard 8-hour shift, 2 meal periods, and if they're working a 10-hour shift or longer, they're entitled to 3 rest periods. And if you miss any one of those, or they are interrupted during their rest periods, an employee is entitled to 1 hour at their regular rate of pay, as adjusted based upon incentive pay, as we discussed, every single time that they miss one.
If you would like some more information about California wage and hour law, feel free to contact one of the attorneys at the law firm of Poole, Shaffery, and Koegle, and you can do so by logging on to our website at pooleshaffery.com. Thank you for watching.